welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out. Welcome back to that same old place.
Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Monday, December 21st, 2015. I am Dan Rubin. It is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and change. Those of you expecting to hear the dulcet tones of one Dave Biddle, Dave is on vacation this week, like many of you. Hopefully he's listening at his palatial estate or on Biddle 1, the jet that tours the country, making many big stops. We're joined today by another big stop himself, Bill Kurelic, the Dean of Ohio State and Midwest Recruiting. Bill, how are you this fine morning?
Very well, Dan. Ready to go for another week.
As everybody knows who's been on Bucknuts for a day or two, Bill Kurelic does not take vacations. That's probably because Urban Meyer Company don't take vacations, and that means Bill's on top of it. Bill, a lot of stuff out there to chat about. Want to try and start the week here by kind of getting everybody up to speed on recruiting, where we are as a team, how recruiting goes at this point in time, in a general sense, now that bowl practice is full on and everyone's kind of intact. What do you expect out of the staff this week?
Well, it is a dead period. They obviously haven't put recruiting on the back burner. As you mentioned, that's never on the back burner at Ohio State. They've got 17 commitments right now, and I still look for them to sign at least 22 players, quite possibly more. We've talked about it before. We don't know right now exactly the number of guys leaving early for the NFL, but it's going to be quite a few. I don't think there's any question about that. So the final number is going to depend on exactly who goes to the NFL. But the coaches obviously, are still, the recruiting's on the front burner when you're on the Urban Meyer staff, and they're going to be doing that all the way up until after the bowl game. Then it really goes on the front burner, and January is going to be really, really busy, really hot. I mean, you've got guys like Benjamin Victor that they would certainly like to have in the class, and things aren't even going to get hot with him until January. That's just the way it happens with the guys in Florida. It's just going to be an interesting last few weeks, and everything that happens between now and then will help lead up to the last few weeks.
Just for those who maybe aren't as up to date on the recruiting scene, a dead period, define that. It means totally no contact either way?
Well, no face-to-face contact. They're still going to be in contact with them, but they can't have face-to-face contact with the recruits.
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to do there is dead period does not mean that Greg Schiano and Urban Meyer after practice are in there eating pizza and watching old Friends reruns. It's recruiting hot and heavy. Right. So let's talk about probably the biggest name out there, at least in my opinion at this point, Dwayne Haskins, the quarterback from Bullis outside of D.C., committed to Maryland, has visited. One of the major dominoes that everyone thought had to fall was the status of Mike Locksley. Mike Locksley was the offensive coordinator and the interim head coach for Maryland before D.J. Durkin took over. For those not familiar with Mike Locksley, he's a longtime college football coach, but he is known as, if not the number one of the top recruiters in the DMV, the District, Maryland, and Virginia area. And Dwayne Haskins and Locks were supposed to be tied at the hip, or at least a lot of people thought that. He was holding out to be offensive coordinator of Maryland. Maryland has gone in a different direction and hired the OC out of Arkansas State, but offered Locksley a position, obviously, at demotion. I can tell you that my sources at Maryland say Locksley has not decided yet. How does Locksley, in your opinion, affect the Haskins recruitment if he stays or goes when it comes to Maryland?
I think it impacts Haskins some, but maybe not now as much as people think, because Haskins really wanted Locksley to stay as the offensive coordinator. That obviously is not going to happen now. And from what I'm told, that Haskins, even if he stays, is worried that he's not going to be the one calling the shots, so to speak, that the new offensive coordinator, Walt Bell, it's going to be his offense, and it's not going to be Mike Locksley's offense. So I think from a relational standpoint, yeah, that helps some. But even if Locksley stays, that doesn't mean that Haskins is absolutely going to stay with his Maryland commitment by no stretch of the imagination. I think Locksley will, I should say, the Haskins camp will see what happens there, and they will, of course, have Walt Bell give them his say and all, and then I think they'll go from there on that. In fact, I was told, and I put this in what I'm hearing this morning, that expect Walt Bell and DJ Durkin to get the first shot at Haskins, but he's going to have to decide from there. And absolutely, Ohio State is in the running, in the picture, very, very much so for Dwayne Haskins at this point.
I know it's been reported that Urban Meyer has offered Locksley a position on Ohio State staff. If it didn't work out at Maryland, obviously it wouldn't be as offensive coordinator. What do you think, if they could add Locksley, does that increase the chances Haskins comes to Columbus as much as one might think?
Well, I think that would help a lot. I mean, as one person that is very familiar with what's going on with Haskins and the Maryland situation, they told me that if Locksley were to end up at Ohio State, that they would squarely put their thinking in, their vote for the Haskins to Ohio State, that'd be almost, in their mind, make it a done deal. Now, I don't know that I'd go quite that far, but I'm just telling you what I've been told. So we'll see what happens. I think that, again, Locksley's got to make a decision of what he wants to do, and that could be stay at Maryland, but, there's also talk that he could go to other places like Pitt, for instance, or Kentucky has been brought up, and, of course, Ohio State as well. So that's going to be an interesting decision that Mike Locksley has to make. And I'm not saying that he has the option to go to all those places. I'm just saying that those places have been brought up.
No doubt. And this is really going on right now behind closed doors. The coaching carousel is nuts this time of year. Let's talk defensive back for a little bit before we get back to the offense. Jason Went, Jordan Fuller are two names we hear a lot. We've heard, good Lord, Jordan Fuller is one of the holdouts here from the beginning of the process. Two East Coast guys, Fuller from Jersey, Went from New York City. What's your latest on those two? I have to admit, Bill, when a guy from Temple gets an offer from Ohio State, I expect him to flip kind of quickly. I'm a little concerned with Went. Is Ohio State's, decision to go after Wentz something that sparked a bunch of other programs to get involved, and that's the issue, or does the kid really consider Temple an option over possibly Ohio State?
I think he's looking at all his options right now. As you mentioned, Dan, he visited Ohio State. It went very well, and he told me at that point he was deciding between Ohio State and Temple, and that it would probably be a week to 2 weeks before he decided. He told me he wanted to talk things over, and he was probably going to take close to 2 weeks to make that decision. Well, as you mentioned, since then he's gotten some other offers. Penn State and Boston College, for instance, have come in, and Rutgers is still there. Ohio State is still there. So, he's really has a lot more to think about now, and I think he's thinking everything over. He's one of, I think, three defensive backs that they are very interested in adding to the program. No doubt you mentioned Jordan Fuller. They still would love to have him, and Greg Schiano has been in contact with him. And then you've got Damar Hamlin still. Ohio State is sometimes left out of the equation with him, but they're still certainly recruiting him. I don't think, right as things stand right now, I think Ohio State is kind of the odd school out, maybe so to speak, right now. I think Notre Dame and Pitt are more likely, but Ohio State hasn't stopped recruiting him. So they would like to add, certainly. They'd love to have Fuller. They'd love to have Kurelic, and Went, of course, is the other guy. And there is, in all likelihood, going to be room for all three of those guys if they want in the class. And then I don't think all three will probably end up in the class, but certainly those are three guys that Ohio State is absolutely recruiting and would like to add to the class. All
right, let's go to some guys those those gents, if they come to Ohio State, would match up with in practice. There's never going to be a recruiting segment that I'm involved with that does not talk about Ben Victor. He's the apple of my eye in this class. I really think they need the elite 6'4", 6+ receiver to change the offense. Donnie Corley is another guy we've talked about. Kind of bring us up to speed on those two receivers, and maybe if there's any other receivers you see that are tempting them.
Well, certainly the two that everybody's talked about most are Victor and Corley. With Victor, he's a Florida guy, obviously, and things are just not going to get real hot with him until January. That's the way it happens generally with the great prospects in Florida. They wait till January, and things then heat up. I still think Ohio State has certainly a very good chance of landing him. He's made visits to Ohio State. He's been to West Virginia. He's been to Tennessee. My sources at Florida don't say there's a lot of confidence that he's going to end up there, but the school that certainly could be a factor now is Miami. We'll see what happens with Mark Richt being hired there as the head coach. But I was told on Sunday that that's still going to happen, that he's still going to take a good look at Miami. But again, it won't get hot until January. So those hoping for a quick decision sometime in the next week or so from Ben Victor are going to be disappointed. Wouldn't be surprised if that one goes all the way down to National Signing Day. The guy that people I think aren't giving Ohio State enough credit for is Donnie Corley. He had a very, very good visit. His family loved it at Ohio State. His dad was very impressed. And he's a guy that everybody is automatically saying is going to Michigan State. And I've been saying for quite some time, Ohio State's got a better chance in this one than people think, and I still feel that way. Ohio State is absolutely still in the running for Donnie Corley.
That would give them an amazing wide receiver haul. And if they were able to somehow shoehorn Victor and Corley into a class of Austin Mack, then you're talking, I think, it's a great defensive end class with the Cooper-Bosa combo, but I think you'd then be able to discuss which is better on either side of the ball, and that's a discussion we'd love to have. All right, Bill, let's finish off with the front row's favorite topic, defensive tackle recruiting. Obviously, the long-term chase of Antoine Jackson fell short this past week. He picked Auburn over the Buckeyes after, good gracious, it felt like months when those were the final two. Some other names have come into effect here. Can you bring us up to speed on your vision of Ohio State defensive tackle recruiting? Is it as suspect as those on the front row would like to say? There are some on the front row who think Larry Johnson has passed his prime, has not been able to hook the type of recruit that they expected when he signed on here. So I think we have a good sense of who they're recruiting. Bring us up to speed on your opinion of defensive tackle recruiting and whether or not it's a problem for Ohio State at this point.
Well, first of all, Larry Johnson has been a great recruiter throughout his career, and he still is a great recruiter. An outstanding coach and an outstanding recruiter. Again, they've brought in some outstanding players since Larry Johnson has been at Ohio State, including the two that are coming in this class, Jonathan Cooper, as well as Nick Bosa. You think about the defensive ends that Ohio State has brought in since Larry Johnson, and it's been an outstanding haul of defensive ends. They've brought in some good defensive tackles, too. Adolphus Washington came in, although, that was at the end of the previous regime, but Adolphus came in. It was sealed when Urban Meyer got that job. But the people that are saying that Larry Johnson can't recruit anymore are just not right. In fact, as a little tease, I'm going to have a item today on one of the top 2017 defensive ends in the country that told me yesterday he considers Larry Johnson to be the best defensive line coach in the country, and he is highly considering Ohio State because he's so impressed with Larry Johnson. And again, I'll have that on. He's a defensive end. I'll have that on the site today. But getting back to defensive tackles, you're still looking at Rashard Lawrence, certainly. Tyler Clark, Georgia commitment, is still considering a visit to Ohio State. But now the other guys. Out to other guys, I had an item about Michael Carter, a defensive lineman out of Georgia, great prospect, right there with Antoine Jackson. They've reached out to him. Jamari Logan from Virginia, they've reached out to him. So they're reaching out to other guys because that's the way Ohio State does it. If they miss on an Antoine Jackson, they're going to reach out to other outstanding prospects and hope that that one of them ends up at Ohio State. You know, who the guy is that ends up as the defensive tackle in this class remains to be seen. But I think it's safe to say that they're going as hard as they can still at defensive tackles. And again, there just aren't that many 6'5", 315-pound great defensive tackle prospects out there in the country, and they're hard to land. But you got to keep going. You know, obviously they're still going after Rashawn Gary. That doesn't look good, but they're still trying to get that last official visit from him, and we'll see if they're able to get that visit.
There you have it, people. A complete and total update on recruiting, as well as what I hope is some talk off the ledge there for those thinking Larry Johnson is past his prime. Bill, we appreciate it. Stay tuned, Bucknuts.
Auburn sucks. I like trucks. He likes trucks. I don't care for Auburn. He doesn't care for Auburn. Hoes.